Welcome to LedgerCast. This is a podcast about the cryptocurrency space, including technical and fundamental analysis. It's hosted by myself, Brian Krogsgaard, and my co-host, Josh Olszewicz. In this episode, we actually talk about buy and sell targets, how we choose our buy targets, how we choose when to sell, what we look at, the technical indicators that we like to use. It's a pretty technical episode, and there's a lot of links in the show notes that you can use to check out visually what we're looking at when we do these things. We got some charts to show you, some videos that you can look at, and some articles with price analysis of the coins that we're trading. We also, of course, talk about the news of the week and everything that's going on in the crypto space. It's been a crazy one. I think that's going to be a recurring theme on this podcast, that it's been a wild week in crypto. Seems to be what happens. It's a lot of fun. Hope you check it out. We also take audience questions. If you have another question for us, you can just tweet Ledger Status or Carpe Noctem what your question is, and we'll try to include that on the show as well. And if you like the podcast, go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and give us a 5-star rating or leave us a review. We really appreciate that, and it helps a lot. So that's about it, and I hope you enjoy the show. Here you go. Hello, and welcome to the official episode 1 of LedgerCast. I'm here with my regular co-host, Josh Olszewicz, otherwise known as Carpe Noctem by some. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Brian. Yo, yo, yo.
It's been a interesting week since episode 0. The crypto market moves fast, you could say.
It feels like it's been 2 months, honestly. Like, it's insane. It's so insane.
I guess this is regular, but it feels irregular to me. We were baffled by potential moves to 13,000 while we were recording last time. And now people are talking about Bitcoin maybe crashing to 13,000 because I think it moved $6,000 within 24 or 48 hours after we talked or something like that. So this is interesting, talking about kind of live price action in this space. So we'll have to see how specific we need to get when we talk about pricing with crypto stuff. But I think it'll be okay. People will enjoy it. We just got to get these episodes out fast, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see $6,000 moves quick like that often. I think we'll see a few more, like, you know, in a few weeks to come, but I don't think after that it'll be like quiet, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy that we're consolidating at all-time highs. Just absolute bonkers. Like $17,000 Bitcoin. What? Like
yeah.
January, it was $1,000. $1,000. Insane.
It really is. I have been trying to make sense of it and figure out how much more of this to expect, and drawing the parabolas and everything I can to try to figure out what the heck is going on. This is definitely your world, though. So before I guess we get into news, maybe since we're already talking price action, do you want to give like a little spiel about where you feel like this is, what it means? Is this a blow off top, or are we just at a new normal? What the heck is going on?
No, I think, like, I tell people this as well. You won't need to ask if it was a parabolic top to know that it was a parabolic, or a blow off top to know that it was a blow off top. I think it'll be super obvious. There'll be devastation and radiation. You know, it'll be just pure bedlam when it does happen. But we don't just chill at all time highs. You know, that wick on Coinbase was extremely local, meaning just their exchange only really based on their inability to handle traffic and put stuff on the order book. I mean, they even limit up to themselves. They shut down, they've done this a couple times since then, but they shut down the order book to post only for like 5 minutes, which is insane to think about. And to think about like the regulatory consequences going forward, like when this gets bigger. Again, this is like a bootstrapped industry. Startups still technically, even though Coinbase is a unicorn, they can't even handle like traffic. I get it. It's a web scaling issue. But it's not just scaling anymore. It's like millions of dollars now and
billions.
Yeah. And I don't know what, if they make a wrong decision one day on when to and when not to turn things off, that's not going to be good. So yeah. I applaud them for doing what they did that day. I think it was the right decision, but I'm sure there were some people who didn't think that was the right decision. And like, I don't know what legally the line there, you know, even if there is one, I don't know.
I have no idea. I do know they just did a whole bunch of infrastructure upgrades. So hopefully they're going to be a little more prepared. That'll probably be a regular thing as well. But I stayed up late just in case it was going to be some coin listings. But
yeah, we got to get to that too.
Yeah, we will.
But yeah, Litecoin, I think I don't understand Litecoin price action at all right now, other than the Coinbase effect. I just think like technically there's no basis whatsoever to be up here.
Yeah, you wrote an article on Brave New Coin where you kind of showed price completely exiting all barriers. I think it was fib levels and definitely the pitchfork that you had drawn, right?
Yeah, so it blew out of the fibs, it blew out of the pitchfork. You could check out the article on Brave New Coin with the charts, but yeah, other than people just seeing like the low coin on Coinbase who don't know any better and just buying it, I really don't have like rationale. Not that you need rationale, but just doesn't make much sense to me.
Yeah, I guess that's towards the dollar charts too, though. So like relative to Bitcoin, it wasn't like it was blowing past all-time highs or anything, but the pace of the gain was pretty intense, to say the least, right?
Yeah, I think the holders were holding or hodling. I don't even know how to say that, but they were holding, sub 100 easy. I know lots of people holding in the teens, in the less than teens, just for years. And so they're not going to sell. Not when they see Ethereum at 700 or 500 at the time, or less, 400, whatever it was. They're making decisions based on relative to everything else, I'm pretty sure, and just like the future protocol upgrades and all the other stuff, SegWit, whatever, Lightning. But yeah, the people buying now have no clue. I just think it's like a couple institutional people maybe, or more than a couple that, and then there's nothing for sale, and then boom, we're at 300,
And then surely a lot of retail buyers too. I mean, I had several friends asking me about Litecoin being a good buy, purely based on it's on Coinbase, it's another alt, it's not as expensive, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then we can talk about Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving effect.
Yeah, you have an amazing chart for price since Thanksgiving. So why don't you just, what's your theory on that?
Yeah, so like I was telling people who were asking me, just my family, because we talked a lot about it at Thanksgiving, just because it's sort of disrupted my own life in a good way. And people just want to know what's going on. And, so I'm telling them about this, and they kind of already know because Bitcoin's in the news. And a few people were asking me like, okay, on Coinbase, what do I buy? And like, we should say, by the way, this is not investment advice, purely educational information.
Yeah, we'll have to put the disclosure at the beginning of shows.
Yeah, and I just told them do 50% Bitcoin, 25% Ethereum, and Litecoin. And this was at Thanksgiving. And since then, Bitcoin's up 110%, Ethereum's up 55% today from Thanksgiving. And then this is November 24th. And then Litecoin's up 328% since Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Insane. Litecoin was sub $100 on 11/24. November 24th. So
yeah, it had really maintained stability, if you will. I think that's what Charlie Lee usually likes to say when he's talking about Litecoin, that it's stable. That argument went out the window now. But it was bleeding out through Bitcoin's growth, just like a lot of alts really. But the magnitude of its reversal and growth now has been just intense. And there's got to be a big retail element to that, certainly led by Coinbase. Like I now for the Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin, I have to keep several exchanges in TradingView because the difference can be 10% or greater because of whether it's the retail lead or the lack of arbitrage potential right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's been intense, and GDAX has definitely been kind of leading the pack on really all three.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this. I like using indexes because it helps you see everything at once, like bird's eye view. But the problem is if you're trading on GDAX and you're using an index, your targets are going to be off, your entries are going to be off, your stop losses are going to be off. So you kind of have to chart the exchange you're trading on, but I think it's still important to look at the index to see what's going on. I think the GDAX premiums are led by definitely retail, but also led by that $25,000 instant buy. I feel like that plays a big role as well, just keeping the premiums up. I don't really know like how that translates mathematically compared to the other exchanges. But the premiums, even on LTC, were just insane compared to Bittrex. The LTC-BTC ratio, for instance, there was some sick arbitrage to be had there if you had the wherewithal to see what was going on.
And you had to be ready to go, too. I mean, yeah. I guess with Litecoin's pretty fast right now, but I know Bitcoin's been a little harder to arbitrage recently, right?
Because impossible, really.
Just because transactions.
Yeah. And another thing people don't realize is and this might sound like sacrilege to some people, but if a network is slow or lagging, just use another one. Like if you're trying to transfer
Right.
BTC to another exchange, put it into LTC through LTC BTC and then transfer it.
Yeah, I've used Litecoin several times purely as a transport vehicle.
Yeah.
Which all alone is a pretty, I guess, a relatively bullish fundamental indicator. I had a friend last night that was trying to transfer money off of GDAX into one of the alt markets and trying to take advantage of some of these setups that exist right now. And he did it in Bitcoin, and it has been sitting there for 6, 8, 12 hours. I don't even know how long.
Mm-hmm.
When he could have been over there in 15, 20 minutes through Litecoin, purely because the network is a lot more open. The pipes aren't clogged right now. I don't think it's necessarily because the protocol is so much better. It's pretty much the same, but the pipes are open.
No, yeah, so I agree though. And again, that's going to sound like sacrilege to some people, but whether or not that creates an in-kind taxable event, I don't know. That's beyond me. But that's another thing to consider when you're trying to go in and out from Bitcoin to LTC. And yeah, the network's similar. The block times are like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and relatively no one is using it compared to Bitcoin. There's definitely fewer unconfirmed transactions, which means the fees are lower. There isn't 30,000 transactions at a penny, or far less than a penny, which is Bitcoin's case. Over 30,000 transactions are currently sitting unconfirmed with fees under a penny, far under a penny. So
yeah, I think the potential drawback is that once you get it somewhere, then you have to sell it to Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So most exchanges are going to have a fee related to that. So it's not a perfect transfer vehicle, but for the transfer itself, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
but since you don't have trading pairs to Litecoin, it makes it harder, I guess, once you get there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you just go back to LTC, BTC, but I just see so many people freaking out about this stuff who don't know that they could do that. Or maybe they do and they just don't. I don't know. But that's definitely an option to consider if it's like super time critical that you want to get that over there. But for the most part, for me, I'm not in a rush to transfer stuff. Anything that I want to sell or whatever is already on the exchange anyway. So,
yeah, you mentioned taxes, by the way. I've noticed an enormous amount of uncertainty from people, even people that have been in crypto for a while, about what's a tax event and what's not. So I've actually been working on an article that will not be tax advice per se, but kind of the way I'm treating it, what I know. So I'm hoping to get that out soon as well. So if people are looking for a resource, I have some thoughts on that because I've seen a lot of misinformation. I am going to run it by my lawyer and accountant first to make sure that I'm not like totally out of bounds.
Yeah, there are free websites that'll like you give them your transaction history and it'll like spit out your tax information.
Right. Yeah, and I've got recommendations for that as well as just some general concepts that people need to better understand because right now I don't think they do. I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, well, as long as I'm trading in crypto, then I don't have to pay taxes. And that's not truth as far as I can tell. So yeah, I've got an article I'm working on in that regard.
Or I'm in Tether. I don't have to pay taxes. I'm like, well, good luck. Have fun claiming that one, whatever.
Yeah, good luck. I don't use Tether. I just use DRX as my fiat fallback. So, yeah. Anyway, so back to, I think it's interesting. Both Charlie Lee and Vitalik Buterin made these like kind of warning sign comments about the price action the last couple of days. Do you think that's them just being a little concerned about overall market cap? All crypto hit a $500 billion market cap, I think, yesterday. So where do you think those kind of comments come from? Are they just astonished or are they truly worried, or what do you think's happening there?
I love Charlie, I love Vitalik, but they need to stop commenting about price. For good or for bad.
They keep saying they won't talk about price anymore, and then something crazy happens and they say something about price.
It's like, talk to me about the protocol and scaling. I don't care what you think about price. Like, it's great that they're on CNBC. I have, Vitalik on CNBC would be huge. I don't know if he'd be like forward facing enough for them. I don't know. I feel like in a sit down conversation, he'd be okay. But yeah, Charlie, Like, just relax with the price stuff. I think he gets a lot of crap from people who buy Litecoin, see him as the face of the Litecoin, and then Litecoin goes down and they blame him. Like, I get it. There's like some guilt there probably from him. I don't know. But yeah, again.
I think you're right. He's probably nervous about someone buying in at $400, and then what if it does go to $250 or $100 or whatever. But that's part of being a developer. I've seen several coin developers complain, I guess, about the number of comments they receive about price and stuff, and it's probably hard not to pay attention to it. But I thought it was interesting. They're just seeing tweets and not necessarily, I don't know if maybe they just don't realize the potential network effect they have on something like that, but it's certainly not small, the type of influence they can have talking about price.
Yeah, I think, how can you not look at the price, right? If you're the developer, I mean, that's like your baby. So you care about it and you want it to be nurtured and succeed. And when you see this speculative bubble, which is what this is really, I mean, it's, in Litecoin's case, again, these people are going to shoot me for saying this, but it's just not, it's not sustainable.
All crypto is speculation right
now.
It
is. It's greed, it's spec, it's unsustainable, it doesn't scale, none of it works properly, it's all in beta, whatever. But yeah, I'm not like hating on Litecoin specifically. Just like I'm thinking like what's going through Charlie's head, like I don't know the metrics as well as I do for Litecoin either. They're not really out there compared to Bitcoin that I'm able to see. Just from like adoption metrics. I don't know. That's another thing. Because like Litecoin hasn't had its like killer app like CryptoKitties, which we failed to talk about last week.
Yeah, CryptoKitties is on the mind this week because we really missed the opportunity. But I'm afraid it might be dead already. It seems like the CryptoKitties futures are not looking bright.
Yeah, I didn't really get.
Have you been keeping up?
No, I didn't really get like into it. It's funny. I see all this stuff like come through, and I'm like, oh, that means I have to learn about this and talk about it in a Brave New Coin article. Like, it's like that's my extent of like caring about most of this stuff. When I see news come through, I'm just like,
So there are probably people here that don't know anything about CryptoKitties. I didn't until I saw it mentioned like 20 times before I figured out what was even happening.
Mm-hmm.
But basically someone created this digital kittens app built on the Ethereum network that went ballistic. Everybody was wanting their own CryptoKitty. There was a secondary market for CryptoKitties. I think one sold for the equivalent of $120,000, which is probably $250,000 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it essentially clogged the entire Ethereum network, which was good and bad. It was good because some people were legitimately saying like this is a dApp on top of Ethereum. That's a positive thing. And on the bad side is this is a pure sign of Ethereum being atrocious at scaling. How are we going to put all of our information infrastructure on a network like this?
I think it
was fascinating to see the two biggest crypto networks completely clogged together between Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, to see unconfirmed transactions on Ethereum was interesting. I didn't think that would ever happen, honestly. And to see, I think at one point the fees were actually higher on Ethereum than Bitcoin.
Wow.
I don't have proof of that currently, but that's just what I heard from people. Yeah, I think it was more good. I think overall, definitely good. Like, again, we're in beta. Stuff's going to happen, get messy. You're not going to want to hear that with like a multi-billion-dollar market cap. But people need to realize like there's stuff out of their control. These are all decentralized vehicles. And if somebody wants to make something like this crypto collectible that just took off and it's going to stress test the network. But mainly the important thing for me, other than stress testing, was it just got so many people talking about what to do with blockchain type stuff,
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of the Yo app. Do you remember that on iOS or somewhere, wherever it was? And it was like created to be incredibly dumb and then just went insane because it kind of had an interesting effect where you can just ping someone, you yo them, but it ended up being huge and created this broader concept of like, oh, we can probably use this in other apps and stuff. And it kind of reminds me of that because CryptoKitties itself may be insignificant in terms of like it's not going to change the world or anything, but showing that you can create a market and this whole concept of whatever this is kind of paves a path for what else can exist there and helps visualize it at least.
Yeah, I think we'll see branded stuff going forward on the blockchain, like could you imagine like a Disney product collectible on the blockchain? Like that'd be unique and interesting. And I don't know enough to talk about Dragon Chain specifically, but that's one thing that's semi-related to Disney as far as I know. I don't know if you know anything about Dragon Chain.
Yeah, it was, and we can get into ICOs. Dragon Chain was interesting. It was kind of at the depths of being depressed about alts because Bitcoin was running. So the ICO, I think, only raised 9 or 10 million.
Mm-hmm.
It probably would have raised 100 million a few months ago. I knew several people that actually put into it. It was uncapped. So being uncapped and not raising 10 million was interesting. It has Disney team members or former Disney people, and there's kind of this loose Disney association that people are making from it. I'm not really sure how legit that Disney association is or isn't, but it's definitely a pitch point. It's cute little dragons. I don't doubt its ability to do something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's another network out there. It's since it's listed, it's done well. I think it benefited from good timing in terms of how the broader markets are doing because we talked about Litecoin, we talked about Ethereum, but in response to Bitcoin hitting those highs and then not crashing, but also not immediately going to whatever 20,000-25,000 and just kind of staying sideways at $15,000 to $17,000 really caused a pretty big spike amongst all altcoins and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really interesting, and then some of them have really bounced hard, and was good timing for this Dragon Chain project, for example. So we'll see what can be made on that. But yeah, that would be interesting if it became a platform for something like that. But it's very, very, very speculative right now. I don't think either of us are advocating people go put a bunch of money into Dragon Chain right now.
No, for sure.
But the people that invested in that ICO have so far done pretty well. ICOs in general seem to have lost their flavor for a few months because there were a lot of scams that popped up, a lot of sketchy stuff, and the SEC actually just came out. Did you read what the SEC wrote about ICOs?
I need to read it again, but I did read it. I think they're dead on. I think they're cold and calculating, and they're the long arm of the law, and they're going to find things whether you like it or not. I think there are a lot of scams out there, more scams than not scams, which kind of give ICOs in general a bad rap, I think, for people who are super skeptical like myself. I'm an ICO minimalist, if anything.
Yeah, it seems like they kind of expanded the scope, if anything. They didn't really say anything super new, but they kind of expanded the scope in terms of saying, probably a lot of these things are securities, and consumers should be very careful, and we're paying very close attention. So I'll be curious if a lot of existing projects kind of tighten up. It also makes me wonder if some of the pauses that we saw, especially from Bittrex, I felt like really slowed down in terms of listing coins, and they actually delisted a few coins, and seemed like maybe something else was going on there. And I wonder if they're
trying to clean up their act. I think that's clear on that email they sent talking about like orders, and they're just trying to, not pretend like they're a big boy now, but just try to grow up a little bit, trying to mature. Right. But most of these ICOs, like the question is it a security, yes or no? How do we know if it's a security? Okay, does it pass the Howey test, which basically talks about using the work of others or promising future gains based off of others, something like that. Look it up. Is it that, or is it a utility token, which is like a Chuck E. Cheese token? Okay, like it's essentially worth whatever it's going to be worth, but I can use it for something like an app or a payment of some kind. And I think the recent SEC rulings were talking specifically about pre-functional utility tokens being securities. And Marco Santori wrote this great thread. He's I think he's a lawyer of some kind. I don't really know if he works for Cooley or who he works for, but there's this great like tweet storm thread talking about pre-functional utility tokens. Because it's like, again, everyone's trying to think they're smarter than the SEC, and they're not going to get caught. But I think bottom line, if you have a utility token with a functioning app, I think you're okay. Not legal advice, but it's certainly better than calling it a utility token without a functional app and thinking you're not a security. So,
yeah, and there may be a difference too in terms of what it is after they've raised money versus while they're raising money, I guess. because some of them have this language like
Mhm.
Tezos got into a whole bunch of stuff. It's probably one of the top of the list in terms of weird stuff going on between their team and like what they call the funds that were raised. And they compared them to tote bags, I think, because they said they were all donations.
Yeah.
But certainly no investors actually think that. So how that ends up playing with the SEC, whether they're looking into that, I can't imagine that they raised so much money and the SEC is not looking into something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely the Wild West. People investing in new ICOs, because it's not like ICOs are ending, should probably be pretty careful. And also note that, if you're in the US versus you're somewhere else, there's probably different rules in terms of whether you could or should participate. That was another thing that probably made the Dragon Chain one interesting for people, is that they somehow had it set up to where participating from the US was totally fine. Anyway, so yeah, lots of interesting stuff there. But moving on to a couple other things that happened this week before we try to sneak into the primary topic. So you talked to Bcasher. So what's your in real life conversation situation there?
Yeah, so I talked to a Bitcoin Cash individual, a few, not necessarily as like representative of all of them, but which I hesitate to think of. We have to get rid of this like in-group, out-group bias to like pull some terms out of nowhere. But, at the end of the day, to me, all of this is typical of like factionism. And you sit down and you talk to somebody like face-to-face about this, and you agree on more than you disagree for the most part. We didn't get to talk about everything that I wanted to talk about, but which is fine. I think the big concern from them was Bitcoin now doesn't feel like it does in 2013, when it was like just the techie people trying to figure stuff out. I think they're super concerned of like corporate interests, bias, and people trying to take over, Bitcoin in general. And they think that the other chain is going to be the way to go. They also mentioned some things I hadn't really considered, like they were feeling that there's some sort of xenophobia towards Chinese or the Chinese influence on Bcash, and they wanted me to call it Bitcoin Cash. By the way, they did. We talked about that a little bit, and it's very clear, again, based on all the propaganda we're seeing, that Bitcoin Cash wants to steal brand, wants to steal new people from the space. I mean, you get Ver on CNBC twice in 1 week talking about how Bitcoin has been a failure. And he's got, the wallet on his site that links to Bitcoin Cash, calling it Bitcoin. I mean, it's...
Yeah, Roger Ver is one of the primary people behind Bitcoin Cash, and he owns Bitcoin.com, and he's creating brand confusion there. And I've not been convinced, mostly because they're basically saying it, although there's a little bit of... differentiation between Roger Ver, what he's trying to do, and what Jihan Wu is trying to do, who's behind Bitmain, a lot of mining capacity as well. But it's been, as far as I can tell, it seems like they want to steal the name Bitcoin. And to me, that's just a non-starter in terms of wanting to trade it, wanting to chart it, wanting to do anything to legitimize it at all. Because in my opinion, that's a threat to the overall economy of crypto and Bitcoin. Like, I'm fine with forks. I'm fine with going and doing something different. But when you're trying to say, oh, we're the real Bitcoin, I don't get that. I don't even get how it can possibly be advantageous to them. Certainly in the near term, but even in the long term, if suddenly you can do something like this. And just everything about it stinks to me. So I've been confused, and also confused by people that are also supporting it. So the fact that you talk to someone that's into Bitcoin Cash in real life and they see it as like the true Bitcoin is fascinating to me.
Yeah, they it's like this scaling debate that's disguised as like a power grab for me. Or a power grab disguised as a scaling debate. Because him and I talked about scaling specifically, and even I think Core needs to update their roadmap on scaling, which is on their website. You can check it out, which I think we'll see in 2018. I'm kind of like on the fence about hard forks and soft forks, because originally I was like so pro soft fork because like we could all choose what to do and what not to do. But then seeing like all these companies drag their feet on the right thing to do on SegWit, it's like, just hard fork it. Screw it, hard fork it, go to 2 megabytes, whatever. And they can either decide to join the party or not. At this point, it's been 4 months at least, over a year since they've known about this thing. And then Brian Armstrong goes on CNBC and says it's not even one of the top 5 things people are asking for. What?
Yeah, that was baffling.
What? Like, I just, again, that stinks. Like, Bitcoin Cash stinks. Like, it doesn't make logical sense to me.
Yeah, I think we're two Coinbase customers that would appreciate SegWit if Brian or someone from Coinbase is listening to this.
Yeah, and I emailed them about SegWit like a week ago, and they emailed me back yesterday, and I don't know, some like a semi-canned response, but they said they would pass it along to the team. That's all that mattered to me, that somebody heard my concerns.
Yeah, that's all you can really hope for right now, I'm sure. Just thinking in terms of how companies work and how a startup works, they are probably just completely underwater in terms of the demands for stuff they have to do right now. But when there's a solution sitting in front of them for some of their problems, like, kind of makes sense, you know?
And you can't be pro SegWit 2x, like die hard, what is this, the term ride or die SegWit 2x, right? And then not implement SegWit after it fails. Like, again, no logical sense to me. None.
So nobody cares about SegWit, despite the fact that we were all on board for SegWit 2x. That's the biggest thing, the biggest reveal to me, that it was, there's a huge like business versus developers situation happening still, and people just aren't willing to really kind of give up on that. And I think broadly, like, SegWit 2x probably would have been fine with a lot of people had it been consensus between business and development communities, and then they took a pitch to the users, or, you know, the people that are integrating Bitcoin. That probably would have gone fine, but the whole like way it happened just put a sour taste in my mouth for a lot of people. So we're kind of beating a dead horse from what we talked about last week, but that'll certainly be a conversation that continues into next year.
And then just to segue into like what I think Coinbase is adding, but like the cynical side of me says they wanted to add SegWit 2x so badly so that they had a fork that they could get fees for, you know, which is why I think they're going to add Bitcoin Cash buy and sell option. No brainer from a business perspective for me. But
so not just distribution of Bitcoin Cash, because that's what they promised before the end of the year was essentially give people access to the Bitcoin Cash, because if you hold Bitcoin on an exchange, you don't have a private keys, and then you may or may not be able to have access to forks like Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, and all the other 6 others I think you linked in an article.
Yeah.
But they don't have any obligation to actually list it as tradable. So now what you're saying is you actually think they'll list it as a tradable asset.
Yeah, I think they will. I think there's too many people who have it. I mean, you could say the same for Bitcoin Gold, but I don't think they're going to list that. I think Bitcoin Cash just has some sort of community wanting to trade it at the very least. So it'll be an interesting event. If they decide not to list it, I'll be ecstatic, but I don't think that'll be the case.
Yeah, if they don't list it, my assumption was going to be that it would actually, from a price action perspective, dump really hard. And it may still, but if it becomes a tradable pair, I think long term its potential value is probably not low. if it's a tradable asset on Coinbase, that would be really legitimizing a second Bitcoin, which is I don't even know.
Well, you're giving free money to people after tax, like the new tax year. So I think for most people they're going to want to dump it, but I don't know.
Yeah. So let's move into our primary topic. We're halfway in, but we wanted to talk this week about kind of what our buy triggers are for things, what our sell targets are. I think both of us, you probably more than just about anybody on Twitter, get like target sir tweets whenever you post some setup. So we want to talk more specifically about kind of indicators we use and what we consider buy triggers, how we set our sell targets and that kind of stuff, which is applicable right now when we saw a lot of bottoms on alts. And now we're seeing things running a little bit, and how do we know when to get rid of them? So as a baseline, what's some of the stuff that you use to do this?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'll give like a target and like reasoning and rationale, and somebody will say when. It's like I don't know, man.
You can't have enough.
Like I just trade.
Do you think it'll be within the next week?
Right? Like like when I posted the ascending triangle for Ethereum, you know, people are asking me when. It's like it's a trade idea. You know, it takes time most of the time. Not everything's like Bitcoin where it just pops like nuts, but some of these ideas, like low time frame ideas, those will pop quicker than the high time frame ideas. If you're trading on a weekly time frame, that's going to take some time to pan out. When I'm thinking about specifically like VTC, Vertcoin, there's this edge-to-edge trade on Vertcoin, which is where price goes from one edge of the cloud to the other. That's on a weekly time frame. That could take months, and I was surprised it kind of happened as quick as it did. But when we're talking about when, you just got to have patience, and that's why you either sit in Bitcoin and trade that, or you are in alts looking for those charts and just kind of realizing you're losing money. That's just how I see it for most people into alts. It's like you're basically trying to beat a buy and hold Bitcoin strategy, which is hard to do right now. So unless you're perfectly buying the like semi bottom and selling the semi top on these ratio flips, like Litecoin, for example, all Litecoin did was retrace 3 months of dipping in the ratio. So yeah, it's at 300, 400, but compared to Bitcoin, who cares? Like again, right. People are going to shoot me for that. But so yeah, what are my buy triggers? Okay, so I trade patterns more than I think people realize I trade patterns. I talk about patterns constantly, but if you don't know anything about patterns, that's like super low hanging fruit pattern recognition that you can paste a printout on your wall even and just compare it each time you see a chart. It goes a little deep.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Patterns could be anything, like anywhere from ascending triangle to bull flags or whatever.
So we'll see triangles a lot. We'll see flags a lot. You'll see flags are more like ranging consolidation of a specific bound area. Like this Ethereum before it popped to what it did today, it was ranging in a pretty tight flag, which again told me it was going to go up just probability wise more than it was going to go down, which made sense based on the ascending triangle idea. So all this stuff kind of builds on itself for the most part when we're talking about markup versus markdown. So, the win thing, again, it's like you just hold it. You got to believe in the chart idea, and you got to use stops, obviously, but you got to give it time to do its thing. So chart patterns are a big buy trigger. Cloud signals, massive buy triggers for me. But again, it depends on your time frame. Like if you're getting signals on the hourly time frame, you can't expect those ideas to give like bigger returns than something on the weekly time frame. Typically, higher time frame means bigger return, bigger percentage move. Typically, I mean, certainly lower time frames can trigger larger moves on higher time frames, but for the most part, that's why I stick to higher time frames. 4 hour.
I think sometimes your Ethereum. I think Ethereum is a good one to just work off of because it's so well known. So maybe other people were looking at this before, but you definitely did an article where you were like, hey, here's this daily, weekly ascending triangle that's basically lasted since Ethereum had that huge run to $400. And you were looking at this ascending triangle, which is a bullish indicator, but it's multi-month consolidation. So when you're looking on the US dollar chart, it's even, but that's also coinciding with the Bitcoin chart where it was tanking because Bitcoin's rising while it's consolidating. So if you're just holding Ethereum that whole time during that entire consolidation period versus the dollar, you're losing Bitcoin. And if your goal in trading is to gain more Bitcoin, then you're in the wrong play at the time. So you kind of want to time these moments of being in or out of the coin, if this is your strategy, to say, okay, well, I want to be in this coin at the end of that consolidation period so that once it's ready to pop one way or the other, I'm ready to trade on that and gain more Bitcoin in the process, whether you're long or short. But I assume most retail traders are going to just be long. They're going to be in the coin or out of the coin. So with Ethereum, you were saying, okay, this looks like it's getting closer to the end of this ascending triangle, and then there's a measured move off of that. But the lower time frame, maybe there's some pennant or something that can help kind of spur action to break out of the triangle or something. So, and that's exactly what has happened with Ethereum. I think you wrote the article a couple months ago saying this is what I'm looking for, and the end result was, I think your measured move off that ascending triangle was a little over $800, which it did today. So, what is a measured move off of a formation like that?
Sure. So we'll go back to triggers again real quick. So the triggers for this triangle were Bollinger Bands, which measure volatility. Those have been really tight. When that happens, you can expect a move shortly thereafter. So they got really tight. As they expanded, you can say, all right, they're expanding north or bullish. It's probably going to keep going. That's a sign of continuation generally. So that was part of the entry. The other part of the entry at that point was cloud signals were screaming buy. So that was probably one of the few times I flipped from Bitcoin into Ethereum on like the ascending triangle stuff, just to capture that. So that was,
and that was actually before it broke the triangle. So that was
it was
probably off that kind of last bounce off the diagonal. Was when it was really tight on the Bollinger Bands, and then the Bollinger Band breakout, the cloud breakout. That's what led it into the break from the ascending triangle. So your entry could have been the diagonal is a little more aggressive, and then another perfectly decent entry is actually on the break of the ascending triangle or on the retest, right?
Yeah, and I think I traded that as ETH BTC, so it went well. But I might not have. I don't exactly remember. I know I was in and out of ETH a few times and not in it now, which is disappointing. But so yeah, measured move. So measured move, again, with patterns, it's almost always to the bottom, like extreme high to extreme low, and then you project that upward to the resistance or the support. For flags, you just take the flag pole, flags or pennants, and you measure that from top to bottom, and then you take that and you move it. We'll put charts on the page for this, but you move it to the triangle point or the support resistant point. So that's how you get targets of 800 for this multi-month thing. You can also do, if you're not sure like where the bottom of the pole is, just use multiple measured moves. That's what I did for Ethereum, and it actually hit both of them. Doesn't always do that, but that's a really great way to do cells. You know, it's that with fib extensions from the top of the pole to the bottom of the pole. Same thing. Or the entirety of the pattern. If it's a cup and handle, you fib from the top of the cup to the bottom of the cup. And then your target's generally the 1.618 fib every time. And so then that gives you, between that and the measured move, it's usually a range. It's not always going to match. If when it does, great. But when it doesn't, you can say, okay, the resistance is going to be in this zone. I can spread my asks or sells in this area. And that's how I do it.
Yeah. So when people say target, you may actually have sell orders across that target because you don't necessarily know if it's going to drill right on whatever your target was.
Right. So ideally, like I have this standard deviation in my head, like on Kijun, especially the Kijun's part of the cloud, it's like mean reversion. Okay. So in my mind, there's this like standard deviation on this target that it's going to hit. It's either going to go above or below before it bounces, but there's a high likelihood it's going to go to that level. The same thing with all these targets. You can spread them out. Even when you're not sure, spread them out like $50, $250, whatever it is. Like I hit a $19,000 sell on Coinbase just by spreading stuff out. Like, all right, like 22,000 seems like a good exit. So I'm just going to go like 1,000, around that, just like spread it out. And some of it got hit. So great. That doesn't always happen, but it worked out. So
yeah. And I hope people know what, Fibonacci numbers are. But there's Fibonacci stuff kind of across the board with measuring trades. So doing these extensions from these peaks and valleys to create a 1.618 extension, a 2.618 extension, whatever, they can get pretty big in crypto sometimes. Like I think Litecoin blew through even the top one on this run. So sometimes they'll exceed your expectations, but if you're looking in the real world of what makes sense, a lot of times it's just that 1.618 extension. And also even between like kind of the 0 and 1, there's all these bars in the retrace area where those are going to be more localized resistances and channels that essentially creates where if you want to trade on lower time frames and average down your price or whatever you want to call it, then you can use a channel like that to try and do that as well. So there's a lot of strategies in terms of playing these long-term versus short-term and whatever else. But I agree with you. I've definitely been loving the fib extensions.
You don't have to really believe like people might think like I believe in like fibs or something, like the deep down, like in my heart of hearts, that these numbers are like magical. Like, no, don't just divorce yourself from that completely. Okay. Don't even like, just think of it as a target and nothing else. If you believe in fibs or whatever astrology, to me, that's all like hogwash, but that doesn't matter. Like you don't need to believe in it to use it effectively. Okay. So I know a lot of people have this like aversion towards TA in general. It's like, yeah, it's voodoo, it's magic. You don't have to take it as gospel. It's not science. It's all about probability. If you don't like it, don't use it. But I'm telling you, it works out more than it doesn't. So you should probably start using it.
Yeah, and all you really have to do to even figure that out is put some of these moves on past charts.
Yeah.
Go back in time.
Yeah, do some back testing.
Look at history. I like to do that too in terms of thinking what kind of velocity this might have. So say you have some altcoin, because these especially, I really like to look at. I like to look at alts versus Bitcoin in terms of what my profit's going to be, because I want more Bitcoin. But sometimes when I'm thinking, okay, well, what could this do? I want to see, well, what's the US dollar value and what's that look like? And when you get into this concept of price discovery versus the dollar, something's gone higher than it's ever gone before. So now what's it going to do? And you can use a fib extension to say, okay, well, I think it might hit $880. That's my current Ethereum fib extension for the 2.618 from the fibs that I drew. And that might be a target, or it could go to the 3.618, but this is price discovery. It could go, who knows where it could go to. And then if you're in a BTC pair, so you're selling to Bitcoin, maybe you convert, well, roughly what Bitcoin is versus what this US dollar target is, and how's that correlate to the Bitcoin chart. And so on that Ethereum pair, I like it right now because on the ETH BTC chart, it correlates to the bottom of the cloud. So that 880 number should also be resistance versus Bitcoin. So whether people are trading versus Bitcoin or dollar or whatever, that's a reasonable target to maybe sell some. And if I hit that 100%, that's okay. If I don't, that's okay. I'll hold on to some. I haven't actually sold mine yet. Kind of banking on another round.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people selling Litecoin. It's certainly not the majority of people, but some people selling Litecoin like sub 200. I'm like, why? It just broke out. Like, again, patience. If you think it's going to go insane, I didn't think it'd go to 300, but I was patient enough to know, like, just let it do its thing. It's going to figure itself out. It's on Coinbase, price discovery, whatever. Because most people don't know about the ratios, okay? Like retail people. Like people just buying like Mima and Peepaw and Grandma just getting in. Like they don't care about ratios, right? They don't need to. Like trading USD value is fine. I think we're seeing that across the board on every alt. We're just people are paying attention to that specifically and just ignoring the pairs, which is fine if that's what you want to do. Like I don't care. So yeah, just let it run, man. These people just closing super early. Like I'm probably closing early at 329 is where I closed eventually. But set your crazy targets like 880 and just let it go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I've liked looking at the dollar for a lot of alts because I've been thinking about it, and actually I think miners, so if somebody has a mining rig, they're looking to break even, whatever, they're going to probably be looking at the US dollar price a decent amount when they're thinking, is this a good time to sell these coins that I've mined? If a team is paying their employees, it might be worthwhile for them looking at what the US dollar value is. And, I guess a few other reasons why that may be applicable. Plus, there's a big segment of the population of traders that's new enough to where they're not really paying too much attention to their overall Bitcoin balance or relative Bitcoin balance. So for me, it's been a useful additional indicator to the Bitcoin charts. Not the only one, but useful as an addition. And really, if you go look at a lot of these, this will get into our pick of the week as well. Some of them, it's not that they've been like crashing. They've been crashing relative to Bitcoin over the past few months, but really they've been consolidating after those massive rises from the spring. They've been consolidating versus the dollar, and some of those are like ending these periods of consolidation, which maybe brings another potential move, whether it's this winter or the spring. Depends on the coin. I don't know. Just calling for alt season is fascinating. It's like Bitcoin chills out for 2 days. Dude. Everybody's calling for alt season already.
When alts come back, like for real, I'm gonna have to just leave social media for a while because the people already nauseate me. Like calling alts are back, like every consolidation move on Bitcoin. It's like when they eventually do come back, it's just gonna be too much for me to handle, I think.
Yeah. So there's another buy trigger thing that I think is worth talking about. We've been talking about breakouts more than bottom calling, but there's a lot of people that love bottom calling. And buying on historical supports and things like that. So if you were trying to say like, here's a good bottom calling strategy, what would you point to?
Well, I always point to the Doge chart. It's like if you're trying to figure out a math problem and you put in 0 and you put in like 1,000,000, right? So the Doge chart to me is like just extremely extremes of just like a pump and dump thing, whatever. But it's got a buy zone, it's got a sell zone every time. And, if you look at stuff like Doge where it's at like this historically low buy zone area, if you want it, you can buy it, you can hold it. Again, you got to be patient. You got to realize you're going to be losing on the BTC ratio most likely most of the time. But eventually, if it works how it did prior, so, if past results can predict the future, buying at historic lows is fine for me. I'm not a huge fan of that because I just feel like I'm losing too much with the Bitcoin stuff. Like all the people who bought alts before Bitcoin jumped to 17, let's say you're into alts at like 10 because you think alts are cheap with Bitcoin at 10, right? People are saying the same thing now and it might go higher. So I'm just super patient in Bitcoin in general. I'm not pushing for like alts most of the time. But if you're looking at patterns again, specifically, like there's a lot of them right now that have Adam Eve double bottoms. So it's a V and a U, and that's generally consolidation, double bottom, reversal type stuff.
And the U is going to be a little bit of a higher low than the V typically.
Yeah, not always. I feel like I see that more in crypto than I do anywhere else. And again, people rake me over the coals for like saying this pattern's not exactly like the pattern it's supposed to be. I'm like, okay, well, you ignore me then, and I'll trade the pattern.
Welcome to crypto,
and we'll see who makes money. But yeah, welcome to crypto. Like things don't always look how they're supposed to look, and like Adam Eve double bottoms in crypto sometimes can look like a triangle too, which is confusing because it'll always look like a bear flag, for instance, if the Eve is higher than the Adam. But yeah,
a lot of the Adam and Eve patterns that are showing up right now on 4-hour charts, they just on the daily, they look either just like a V or maybe like a little ascending triangle or maybe a bear flag. It's kind of, it can get a little complicated in terms of trying to decipher what those are. And I don't know, these are all games of probability. So you just got to be careful when you're trading them. You can't just say, oh, look, Adam and Eve on the 4-hour, this will definitely go up by the depth of the pattern. But on some of them, it's already that is happening. So that's the risks that you take. One other thing in terms of something goes way up or something goes way down that I think is interesting is this concept of returning to the mean. So if you're looking at like the cloud, if the price gets way away from say the Tinkin, then it's drawn to come back to that because it's just returning to that historical average basically. Is that something that you use frequently, either if something dumps looking for a rebound or if something goes way up looking for potential new entry prices lower?
Definitely. And people always ask me like, how low do I think this is going to go? Or where can I get in? Because I missed the entire move, even though I saw the flag and did nothing. It's always the same answer. It's always like the 4-hour Kijun or the daily Kijun or some like pitchfork median line, something like that. It's always just trend reversion. Even though it always seems like it's too low, it's not going to keep going down. There's no way it's going to go that low. Like I hear that all the time. Like, okay, well, I'm going to put my bids there. If it hits, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'll chase it a little bit up as it moves. But generally, it more often than not goes back to some sort of reversion of some kind.
Yeah, and it takes a special type of person too. If it's a dump, especially, and it's like all of a sudden loses 30% of its value versus Bitcoin, and it's far away from any of these indicators to say, all right, well, I'm going in, I'm catching that knife and watching it rebound.
And you have to like recognize that emotion and say, I know how to use this. Like, this is an indicator for me personally. Like if I'm feeling like, I don't know, like I buy, like, that's how I know it's okay. It's okay to get in because more often than not, like, I'm not going to feel good about that entry.
Yeah. And that feeling probably depends on where in the market cycle you are too.
Yeah.
If you're buying the dips or whatever in August or October or whatever, you may have a lot longer to go, and be careful with those position sizes because you may be holding on to them for a long time.
Yeah.
But maybe when you're already in kind of market lows, like you were talking about with Doge, and you see a big dip, say to 15 sats when it's been sitting at 2021, maybe that is a good time to buy some Doge or whatever coin. Yeah, I know during the fall, every time I rage dumped something because I was just not confident in the pattern, I didn't actually regret it. If anything, I regretted the ones I held on to once they left my own stops, So you just got to be careful with that and be mindful of the fact, I think, that especially relative to Bitcoin, every alt can always go lower. Seeing that with Zcash has been fascinating recently because it reached all-time lows and then just kept going, and now it's spiking back up a bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean it can't still go lower. It's still consolidating versus the dollar is the thing that I'm looking at. So if Bitcoin has another run, I could totally see Zcash making even lower lows, which would depress a lot of people that have it at a high price.
And all these Adam and Eves can just get wrecked by Bitcoin making new all-time highs here. So that's another reason I'm like not all in on alts right now. I just think Bitcoin's got room to go, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah,
so we'll see what it does, but yeah.
And then you talked about cloud indicators. I think I learned this from you. So both of us like the cloud in terms of trading. You have a whole series that I can link to. I've linked to it a lot of times on how to use the cloud for indicators. And that's essentially trend confirmation. So if the cloud is all 4 things on the checklist are ticked, then that's your indication of essentially a bull market on that time frame, right?
Mm-hmm. So how does the cloud? Let's do questions. We'll do questions. So we had some Twitter questions.
Yeah, this is King Midas.
They want to
know, how does the cloud know?
It's a good name, King Midas. Yeah. So how does the cloud know? Why does BTC price happen after the USD price move? So how does the cloud know? The cloud is dynamic support resistance. When those checkboxes are ticked, it's telling you that it's either going above or below that dynamic support resistance, and that's why the entries are where they are. That's how the cloud knows. And for things like edge-to-edge trades, all that is mean reversion specifically. When you see that flat line on the cloud on the Kumo, that's a 50% fib of the move, basically. When you see
that's the definition of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it is. Like, if you don't know that, you're like, "Whoa, this is like amazing," right? or like chart patterns. Like, if you don't know chart patterns, you think like I'm some sort of wizard, but like you can do this too. Like, it's not that hard, I promise. All you have to do is just draw it out and know what the patterns are. And the same thing's for cloud. Like, you just have to know entries, triggers, and the levels that the cloud is telling you. And that's why the price, more often than not, acts the way the cloud thinks it's going to.
Yeah. One other note on the once all 4 of those things hit, like if you don't speculatively enter before all 4 triggers hit, you may not want to enter when the price is way up above the Tinkin line.
Or the Kijun.
You may want to set your order on a retest of either the Tinkin if you're really aggressive or the Kijun, because it's usually going to retest that even in the bull trend, and it's going to use those as that dynamic support during that run. So you could potentially lose money if all 4 of those triggers hit, but you're not in until it's like way up above on the kind of reaction to bullishness, I guess.
And even on this Ethereum rise, like during that flag, that ranging flag, like it hit the Kijun twice, more at least. So there's your re-entry right there a few times. Even if you don't believe in signals or patterns, rather, you can at least use the mean reversion strategy to get in if you missed the ascending triangle breakout or whatever.
Yeah. So that's how the cloud knows. I think one, especially when, say, alts are not back or whatever you want to call it, like you're looking for more subtle moves if you're in an alt play, those edge-to-edge trades can be really great, especially on like a 4-hour time frame. So if something does pop into the cloud, the high probability move is that it's going to go from the bottom of the cloud to the top of the cloud. And then if your stop is essentially some kind of cloud exit or whatever, you might get stopped out sometimes, but a lot of times you're gonna hit that trade. And if it's really bullish, it'll break out of it, and maybe you'll not catch it all if you set your order ahead of time. Or if you're monitoring it pretty closely, you can just kind of keep moving up your stops using various tools. I know you like the Williams fractal on that, and you did a video on setting stops using Williams fractals, huh?
Yeah, and back to the edge-to-edge thing real quick. Like, you can think of the edges of the cloud as like very rigid lines, okay? So if it breaks one line, it's going to go to the next one. Just think of like the middle of the cloud is this like puffy area of soft cotton, right? And then price can do all this stuff. It can go like, zigzag, whatever, but it's going to want to test the other edge, and it's going to probably see the other edge as resistance or support, depending on the direction.
Yeah. I'll give an example coin that I liked to play in that recently, which was Counterparty, which is just this coin, and long term, it's kind of on these lows that might might have an opportunity for long-term gains. But in the meantime, the daily cloud was like some, I don't know, 30-40% move. And it just seemed to love bouncing back and forth like every day. So it's a pretty good opportunity if you are looking to play that and you're willing to take the risk of some drops. But being able to play a 30% move on a almost daily basis was pretty awesome. So another question from D. Brizzy is 2018 looks to be the year of the DEX, which is the decentralized exchange. Are you currently trading on any, and which ones have you most excited? Are you a decentralized exchange trader?
No, I don't think there's any reason for anybody to trade on a decentralized exchange right now. It's all about liquidity. If you don't have that, you don't have your, all this stuff we're talking about with entries and exits and stop losses just goes completely out the window. Order books are thin, prices all over the place. Yeah, it's just impossible really to trade how I want to trade anyway. So no, I don't use any decentralized exchanges. Do any excite me? I'm involved with one, altcoin.io. It's exciting to the point where they're doing something new. I don't know if it's going to end up being an exchange that we know and love as an exchange. But at the very least, they're going to do some interesting tech type introductions into the space. So we'll see. It may fail. Who knows? But if it does anything, I think it's going to do some interesting things. Yeah.
A couple others that I think are interesting. Waves essentially has their own kind of decentralized exchange with the ability to really easily make tokens and all sorts of stuff. And they seem to have some a little bit of a foothold. Obviously, Waves is pretty much the primary traded token there. But it's still interesting to me. 0x, we talked about it last week. It's got a lot of probably big business support, if you will. And the reason I like that one, I am a holder of that one. I like it because of the shared liquidity. That's my fiat. I joked last night about that because if you look at the dollar chart on 0x, it's basically been stable at whatever it costs a quarter or something. But it's been just getting demolished by Bitcoin.
Yeah. And BitShares is another decentralized exchange.
Yeah, BitShares is a decentralized exchange. That one's been around a good while. Counterparty's got some stuff.
Yeah, Counterparty too.
We'll
need DEXs eventually. I don't think we're going to need them in 2018 so much, but eventually we'll need them.
But I think there's some speculative trades that are definitely going to be happening in 2018 based on the promise of a decentralized exchange because it aligns well with crypto generally. I just bought I bought a speculative coin, and it's like I bought it and just going to let it sit there for a long time, which was called Heat. It's like a $10 million market cap. I learned about it from Not So Fast, who was all about it. Did some research and decided to buy. And partially, I just wanted to see what it was like to use their own you buy it off their own decentralized exchange. That's the most popular place to buy it. So I went through the process, used the wallet, bought some coins off Heat. That was pretty cool. So that's another one that's there's a lot of these projects. So it's definitely unknown territory, and going all in because one is going to be the future of decentralized exchanges is probably very dangerous.
Like one of the 100 is going to be like the one, right? I mean, there could be more than one, but like that's probably how it's going to happen.
Yeah, something's going to pop up and it's going to be the way to do it.
Yeah.
And all the others are going to have a hard time potentially. So just be careful with those types of investments. Matt Leskanek said, what do you think about the future of anonymity coins? So the Anon segment, do you think it'll be simply a feature of Bitcoin or Litecoin, or do you think they will survive or go big on their own? So this is Monero, Zcash, Zcoin, Dash, kind of Pivx, or whatever that one's called. There's a whole sector of Anon coins. What do you think about them?
Well, Dash and Pivx have an option to do anonymous transactions. So they're like Anon Lite. And then Zeek, it was recently found out that most of the transactions are impossible to actually make anonymous because unless they're shielded from end to end, you can read the paper if you don't have no clue what I'm talking about. But it was something like 3% of the transactions were actually anonymous. So it's not currently. But again, it's like, is that really an anonymous coin? I don't know. Is it really a privacy coin? Which I think, again, back to the price of Zeek was just getting wrecked. I mean, that's why I sold my Zeek. I was like, all right, it's not what it says it is.
That's when I sold mine too. And it did go down from there, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay there.
Yeah.
They instantly put out a rebuttal that was compelling enough, but the researcher did pretty decent work in terms of saying, at least right now, Zcash transactions are not anonymous.
Yeah,
often.
So then there's Monero, which is like the cream of the crop as far as anonymous transactions are concerned. And how that works in Monero is it's basically like coin mixing via addresses. So, I send from A to B, but it goes through 2 or 3 other people first. And then it also creates a new address on the receiver's end. So it's just completely shielded in that respect from being traced or trackable or however you want to say that. Do I think they have a future? Definitely. I think.
Yeah, I really like Monero. They do. There's one downside that's worth mentioning, though. I don't know if you ever talk about it, but it's basically the challenge of a hardware wallet support. Like, it's not a clone of Bitcoin or anything. Like, it's not easy to it's not super easy to support Monero in hardware wallets. So some people critique it for that, but I like Monero. That's probably my biggest play, if you will. And I'm pretty into the whole sector because I do actually think this sector has a pretty bright future, at least for the next year or two.
Yeah, I think we're going to see coin analysis like we've never seen it before, in 2018 or 2020, whenever it's going to happen. Everyone's stuff is going to be analyzed. And if we don't have anonymous transactions or confidential transactions at that point on Bitcoin or Litecoin, we definitely will shortly thereafter. But I also think Coinbase is going to stay away from CTs or privacy coins because like there's some legal issues there. Even though like Wall Street is all over Zeek, mainly because of this decentralized currency group hotbed.
Barry's bags.
Yeah. But I think in general, like we're definitely moving towards that. I really honestly think if Bitcoin moves towards confidential transactions with a soft or hard fork, Coinbase just won't ever add that option. Or, you won't be able to ever do that through Coinbase just from a legal perspective. So either they'll refuse to the hard fork or they'll just not allow it. Like SegWit, they just won't put that option on their platform.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because a lot of retail fears for Bitcoin are that it is used for dark money and it's untrackable and all these things, but actually it's probably the most trackable asset ever.
Yeah.
Because if you have a Bitcoin address, you can essentially do the coin analysis, like you said, on the address and just find out everywhere and every transaction and everything and have a complete log. And I guarantee you the government's doing that already. I know they are. I have an interesting person that I know in my area of town that's an investigator for the Department of Treasury. That I talked to him about crypto, and it's fascinating. But something like Monero or some of the others, Zcoin is another one that's really on the rise. I don't, it's to be determined if it's because of real world use cases or if it's just because people are loving it for the price action. They are introducing master nodes, but it's got this minting concept that's similar to Monero. It's based on the Zero Coin protocol. So there's lots of interesting ones. I kind of spread myself out between them because I do think it'll be a good sector for the next year. Kind of a long-term play for me. But yeah, it's interesting space.
Yeah, so William asks about BTC. We already talked about that a little bit. Just look at the weekly cloud. It's still got some time on that. And then Flowers asks us. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Vertcoin. Yeah, it's long-term play. I entered that one and I've swing traded it, but basically I'm waiting for the top tier target on the weekly to get it fully out, and even then I'll probably just keep rising those stops if it wants to keep going.
Yeah, it was flagging like in the cloud on the weekly, so that's got a bullish bias already on it. And then Flowers asks about fundamentals and holding. What do I like best and why? Monero, Zeek, or Dash? So again, back to this privacy stuff. And it's interesting that like there's a lot of speculation around privacy before it's like a huge deal. Like again, I think this is going to be a massive problem for crypto 2018, 2020. Whenever it happens, it's going to be a big deal. I'm not like ringing the death knell or anything, but yeah, like privacy coins are going to be a thing until, Bitcoin implements privacy confidential transactions. So if you want to make that play, go for it. I'm not currently, but it's certainly an option. Definitely.
Cool. We are like overtime basically.
Yeah. So I was trying to like get through this a little quicker.
Yeah. Quickly, let's do coin of the week. Do you have a favorite coin of the week right now?
I don't have a Doge, man. You just got to look at Doge. Look at the chart.
It spiked down again.
Yeah.
The USD chart, which I don't know if I was the first human to look at the USD Doge chart. It's got a nice cup and handle right now that's looking to break out of. So just saying. But versus Bitcoin, it's like at the bottom of this humongous market cycle thing that
literally
it does.
Scraping the bottom right now.
Yeah. And also teasing a cloud entry, by the way. Edge-to-edge trade, maybe. Maybe. Be very careful.
Yeah.
Mine is probably Waves, just because it's just been on this interesting pattern that I don't know, it's been speaking to me. It's also kind of in price discovery mode versus the dollar. And apparently they got some news going, got a lot of hype. I like the hype machine. I got a small bag of waves, not much, but still riding it, letting it go, see where it takes me. That's
yeah,
my
if
coin of the week.
you're talking about like fundamentals and holding, there's privacy coins, there's DEX coins. We kind of talked about those, but like sort of spreading that out if you want to diversify into that sort of thing, definitely it's an option.
Yeah. Yep. All right, cool. This is fun, and we look forward to talking to everybody next time. Josh, you got some stuff to plug, man. You put out a ton of videos, ton of articles. What do you got?
Yeah, YouTube, Carpe Noctem, Brave New Coin, just absolute. Look, it's the best TA on the internet. I'll just say it like that.
That's true. I'll second that.
We do 3 articles a week minimum. I don't know. Check it out. Follow me on Twitter.
And then you did a bunch of lists for YouTube videos that
I did some lists.
Really enjoyed.
People love end of year lists, so check those out. Just like top indicators, top coins, I think, for 2018. No surprises, really. Top charts. Yeah, I don't know. It was fun. Check it out.
Awesome. And go to ledgerstatus.com and follow Ledger Status to keep up with that. And we will catch y'all next time.
Monuments crumble in the blink of an eye. The easy river has just run dry. In a house of cards, I feel the breeze wound so tight I can barely breathe.